Hi, this is my Caffeine Controversies assignment. My name's Hannah Creech, and the controversial topic I chose to narrow in on a particular controversy with alcohol or with caffeine, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the controversy of the mixing of caffeine and alcohol. So first, I'll give some information based on the research I did about what we know about the consumption of caffeine and alcohol as of now, and then at the end, I will give my overall opinion on the controversy and how I feel about it and my personal lifestyle choices in relation to consuming caffeine and alcohol. Like, do I do that? Would I, etc. So the majority of the information I found came from self.com that I'll talk about, and then if I refer to any other sources, I'll reference them at that time. So most of what I found arose because of 9 hospitalizations of college students after the consumption of Four Locos, which were actually invented by Ohio State students because they had noticed that at the bars a lot of students were mixing caffeine and alcohol, and they were trying to think of a way that they could do it so that students could purchase them for really cheap. I think Four Locos are like $1 or $2 at a gas station. There were also some hospitalizations outside of those 9, all in one short period of time, of college students in underage teens, which is obviously a concern. I think the marketing of Four Locos and obviously the price make them more appealing to the younger population, and the fact that they have such a high percentage of alcohol for such a low price. So this controversy was brought to attention because of the hospitalizations and sickness of people who had consumed Four Locos, although Four Locos aren't the only caffeine and alcohol mixture beverage. So in 2010, the FDA released warnings to Four Locos parent company Fusion, Phusion, and any companies that produce similar drinks, and they pretty much forced them to halt all sales immediately. At that point, Four Loko reformulated their drink and removed the use of taurine, I don't know how to pronounce it, caffeine, and guarana, and they made that announcement that it was voluntary, although the FDA didn't necessarily say they had to take it out, but they probably wouldn't have been able to continue to sell had they kept it in there. This article also stated that 1 in 3 adults in 2015 had had at least one drink containing alcohol and caffeine within the past year, which is interesting. And some of the biology, or I guess even chemistry behind it is it has to do with a chemical that your body makes called adenosine. And adenosine is a chemical that builds up in your brain throughout the day, and as it builds up, you get sleepier. So the more adenosine you have, the more tired you are. And caffeine obviously blocks your adenosine receptors, which makes you feel more awake, but it also leads to an increase in your heart rate and your blood pressure. Alcohol, however, causes the adenosine to build up and slows your reaction time, reduces your fine motor skills, etc. A lot of the common side effects of alcohol consumption in excess. And so those two things competing to regulate your adenosine are kind of an issue, but alcohol also increases your heart rate and blood pressure. So consuming two things at the same time that both are known to increase your heart rate and blood pressure is obviously a little bit concerning because consuming them together will put a little bit extra strain on your heart. I think a lot of the issues that we're talked about too are just lack of knowledge on the topic. There are no studies about the long-term effects of people who regularly consume caffeine and alcohol together. The myth that caffeine will help you be more clear-headed and conscientious when you're drunk was also addressed. That's obviously not true. It's in fact more dangerous because the consumption of caffeine makes you feel like you're more conscientious because you feel more awake, but you're actually just as impaired as you'd be without it. And the big issue is that because you feel more awake due to the caffeine, oftentimes people stay up longer and therefore stay out later and drink more, which causes more damage to them. There's also not much research on whether there's a difference between what type of caffeine mixed with alcohol, like if there are different effects based on the type of caffeine that's mixed with alcohol. And there was a study that I read about in Nutrition Reviews in 2015 that stated that consuming alcohol and energy drinks is associated with higher rates of binge drinking, engaging in risky sexual behavior, and drunk driving, all of which are dangerous behaviors and frowned upon, obviously. And then another myth that was addressed that I read about was that drinking coffee when you're drunk to try and sober you up obviously won't sober you up. You might feel a little bit more awake, but your body is just as affected by the alcohol as it was before you consumed caffeine. Another thing that was addressed in a different article I read by theatlantic.com is that it's kind of silly to raise such a fuss about this because every alcoholic beverage is somewhat dangerous. None will ever be able to be stated as proven safe, which is definitely true, but I think some can be less safe than others, so to speak. It also talked about a Wake Forest University study that was conducted, and the study found that students who combine caffeine and alcohol are also more likely to suffer from alcohol-related injuries than those who drink alcohol without caffeine. My guess would probably be because of the fact that they feel more awake and they may feel more sober despite the fact that they aren't. So they probably take more risks and think they are more capable of doing things that they aren't when drunk. And then another interesting thing I found was that more women have been hospitalized due to this than men. I don't know if that's because their tolerance is lower because the women are oftentimes smaller, or it may affect different genders, like because of our physical makeup and our biology, it might affect different genders entirely differently. I've heard about studies on, like, I think it was Ambien, and I think that's a sleeping medication, and it, like, affects women almost 3 times as much or something like that as men, so maybe this is something to be looked into in the future as well. So now that I've given some facts and learned a little bit about it, I'll just state my overall opinion really briefly. I think in any case with anything, if there are proven facts that something could be dangerous or cause problems, why take the risk? And in this case, there have been several cases of people who have all consumed the same beverage and ended up hospitalized or really sick. And there have been studies and research done that associate this drink with worse behavior than just drinking alcohol on its own, and therefore more risk for danger. So, in my opinion, why take the risk of consuming a drink like this if there is any research or proof whatsoever that it could cause problems? I also think, however, that since there are no long-term effects that have been found yet, and there isn't much research behind this topic, I think that if possible, research should continue, although I'm sure it's hard to conduct research without asking people to consume it and risk hurting themselves to study. So I don't know how exactly that could be done, but I think it would be interesting to continue to research the topic and get more answers about what's causing the problem so that it can be more safely consumed in the future, because honestly, I think that people will continue to consume it whether they know that it's safe or not, because people already are after all this controversy with Four Loko. So basically my 2 main opinions are, I personally will not take the risk. I have had a energy drink mixed with alcohol before. I've had a vodka Red Bull, and I didn't really notice any change specifically in me or feeling any different. I didn't necessarily feel more awake, but now after learning so much about this, I can honestly say I won't be consuming anything like that again. It scared me a little bit to read about what's happened to people. And then my second opinion, so my first opinion, why take the risk if there's any possibility of getting hurt? And also continue to research the topic if possible and find out what's causing the problems a little bit more and if there are any long-term effects. Thank you.